Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines coming out of West Asia this hour. Israel says its forces struck Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon, including a Radwan training compound, military structures and a launch site. The strikes come days after both countries sent civilian envoys to a ceasefire monitoring committee. The United Nations says Israeli police forcibly entered its UNRWA compound in East Jerusalem, calling the raid a new challenge to international law. Officials say police arrived with motorcycles, trucks and forklifts as they carried out the unauthorized operation. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says the second phase of Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan is close, though key issues like Hamas disarmament and security arrangements remain unsolved. Netanyahu will meet with President Trump at the end of this month. A former IDF hostage negotiator, Nitzan Eylon, says Hamas faces objective difficulties in locating the body of Ran Glivi, the last deceased hostage held in Gaza. He says pressure on Hamas is still key and believes Israel that the body can be recovered. Saudi Arabia and Qatar sign a deal to build a high-speed electric rail link between Riyadh and Doha in a first-of-its-kind project for the two states. The line will connect King Salman International Airport with Hamad International Airport. Militants attacked a security checkpoint in Kuram near the Afghan border, killing 6 soldiers and 3 police, according to security sources. The assault comes as Pakistan and Afghanistan try to hold a fragile truce after deadly border clashes in October. Syrians celebrate the first anniversary of Bashar al-Assad's overthrow with events across Damascus and other cities as the country struggles to recover from years of war. President Ahmed al-Shara says his government has set out on a vision for a promising future, calling it a break from a dark chapter. Thailand says it is moving to expel Cambodian troops as fighting along their disputed border intensifies, with Cambodia reporting 6 dead. Both sides blame each other as violence undermines a Trump-brokered ceasefire that halted earlier July clashes. We start this hour in Lebanon, and the Israeli military has said that it's carried out a series of airstrikes across the south of the country. According to the Israeli Defense Forces, targets included a training compound used by Hezbollah's elite Radwan forces, along with several military buildings and a rocket launching site. The strikes come just days after Israel and Lebanon sent civilian envoys to monitor their US-brokered ceasefire. Despite the truce, both sides continue to accuse each other of violations. Lebanon's media outlet confirmed that Israeli warplanes struck multiple locations in the south, raising tensions along the border once again. The Israeli military says the targets posed a direct threat to the state of Israel, highlighting ongoing concerns about Hezbollah's military activities in the region. Joining us now is Gedaliah Blum. He is a Middle East affairs expert, joining us live from Eli in Israel. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, Gedaliah. Now, of course, this ceasefire, after a very violent few months, was brokered last year, just over a year ago now, in 2024. And of course, the IDF has struck Lebanon multiple times, what it calls Hezbollah training sites, military sites, etc. What's different about this escalation that's happened in the past 24 hours?
Nothing is different, and certainly, the headline is Israel breaks ceasefire. In fact, there was a ceasefire agreement, which a lot of people are forgetting about, and that some of the terms of the ceasefire agreement was that Hezbollah would be moved north of the Litani River, that they would disarm. They are doing neither of those. And so they're actually bringing in more weapons. Iran is transferring more weapons into Hezbollah's hands. Al-Jolani's guys within Syria are helping facilitate the weapons transfer into Hezbollah's hands. So while people might think that there's quiet, we understand what quiet means. We learned what quiet means on October 7th, when you leave an enemy who exists solely for the destruction of Israel. If you let them go quietly, they are going to rearm and rebuild and remain an existential threat to Israel. And Israel is not willing to do that. We are fulfilling our obligation under the ceasefire agreement and giving the Lebanese government an opportunity to disarm Hezbollah, in which they did agree to, with a deadline coming up within about 2.5 weeks. And they have, at this point in time, have done zero on that front. And so Israel is doing what it is obligated to do, and it's to secure its borders and its communities from a Hezbollah stronghold.
Gadol, I just want to give our viewers a bit of the perspective about the volume of these strikes. Between mid-October and mid-September of 2025 alone, monitoring organizations recorded over 3,250 Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon, the highest monthly total ever recorded in this region. Given the intensity of this bombing, how can Israel justify continuing such operations after this ceasefire has been signed?
Yeah, so I mean, very simple, okay? Just last week, Israel and Lebanon, not the military, not through just international mediators, but its own government officials had sat down together and to discuss the day after Hezbollah. That only occurred after that long list of attacks that you just made. So I'm going to tell you something. We need to separate very clearly attacks on Hezbollah strongholds and attacks on Lebanon, because Hezbollah is not Lebanon. Hezbollah is an implant of Iran, who's taken over Lebanon militarily and politically. And I think it's very important for all of your viewers to see that there is really no daylight between the Israeli
Hezbollah
and the Lebanese.
Hezbollah is who the ceasefire is signed with, correct? And that's who you've struck over 3,000 times in the space of 1 month.
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. The ceasefire is not signed with Hezbollah. The ceasefire was signed with the Lebanese government, who promised in the agreement to disarm Hezbollah. Hezbollah would never sign an agreement to disarm themselves. No terrorist organization ever in the history of the world has ever disarmed themselves. So that is not true at all. The agreement was signed with Lebanon. Lebanon is not able to fulfill its obligations. So instead, they're very happy, and I know this, they're very happy to see that the Israeli government and the IDF targeting and disarming Hezbollah in a way that they can never do, because it would only spark a civil war within Lebanon, and they do not want to see that. So they're very happy to see, as long as Lebanese targets aren't targeted, as long as they're isolated to Hezbollah strongholds, they're very happy, especially when it comes to the supply lines. And I think at the end of the day, we see that they're very happy because they are sitting down with Israeli officials and discussing economic prosperity between two countries, which we all understand will only happen when Hezbollah is no longer empowered.
Gadol, if you don't mind, just briefly talk about the Radwan fighters that were targeted in these strikes. What more, just briefly, can you tell us about them?
These are some of the highest trained jihadi terrorists that exist right now on the ground. They're very, very highly trained. In fact, I'll tell you this, and I'll tell your audience. On October 7th, they were supposed to be coordinating with Hamas to enter into northern Israel and take over towns and highways and junctions, and essentially cut off the whole north of Israel from the rest of Israel. They are very capable of doing that. So we have to understand that when we target them, we are not looking to take over Lebanon. We're not looking to occupy Lebanon. We're not looking to expand Israeli borders. What we are looking to simply do is to push off those who seek harm to Israel and the state of Israel and the people of Israel. We are looking to push them back, disable them, and make sure that they have that Israel has the deterrence power in order to keep them pacified against further attacks.
Okay, Gidalai, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of the region. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned Israel's unauthorized entry into the UN Sheikh Jarrah compound held by the UN Relief Agency for Palestinians located in East Jerusalem. Let's listen in to what the UN spokesperson has said about this issue.
Secretary General urges Israel to immediately take all necessary steps to help restore, preserve, and uphold the inviolability of UNRWA premises and refrain from taking any further action with regard to UNRWA premises in line with Israel's obligations under the Charter of the UN and its other obligations under international law, including those concerning privileges and immunities of the United Nations.
Israeli authorities entered the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency's East Jerusalem offices and raised Israel's flag in a raid they said was ordered over unpaid taxes, but was condemned by the agency as a challenge to international law. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which has been accused of bias by Israel, has not used the building since the start of this year after Israel ordered it to vacate all its premises and cease its operations. Gedaliah Blum joins us once again to discuss this. UNRWA says this raid involved sizable numbers. On what legal or security basis can its forced entry be justified, especially given UNRWA's internationally protected status?
Well, let's start off with those points I think that were buried in the story, that they had unpaid taxes, that they were not vacating the premises since the beginning of the year. Why? Number one is UNRWA is not suspected of working with Hamas. There's documented proof that many Hamas members have been hired by UNRWA, and UNRWA hiring Hamas members. And so we don't see in Israel as any separation between Hamas and UNRWA. At the very least, we'll say that UNRWA is harboring terrorism by collaborating and working with Hamas. They have no right to be in the state of Israel. We are a sovereign nation. We should not allow, we have a responsibility and obligation not only to remove Hamas operatives from within the state of Israel, but those who harbor them and those who work and collaborate with them. That's number one. This is why they were forced to be removed from the premise. Number two is they haven't been paying their municipal taxes. Now, I don't know, this isn't about international law. This is about a very local statute that if you have a building, that you need to pay taxes, and that's it. And there's two things that my teacher in grade school used to say, is that there's two things I have to do. Is number one, stay black, and number two three things: stay black, die, and pay taxes. These are three things that they had to do. So listen, at the end of the day, they're trying to make this into some political stunt. They're trying to turn it into a police raid, as like there's a SWAT team coming off helicopters and crashing into, crashing through windows. There was no one in there. The police went there as a precaution, and they had a couple of pictures of a couple of policemen probably sitting outside smoking cigarettes, and they're calling it a raid. It's a complete farce. It's a complete propaganda, and I expect nothing less from the UN, especially UNRWA, who again collaborates, cooperates, and works with Hamas. And so at this point right now, this is what I call fake news.
East Jerusalem, of course, is considered by the United Nations to be belong to an occupied Palestinian territory.
Yeah, well, the UN is also made up of a majority of fear societies, those who are communist, Marxist, jihadist, Islamist, and so they're given equal rights.
I'm sorry, Gedaliah,
against the Freemasons.
I've been told we're running out of time. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Pleasure to have you on. We now move on, and a spokesperson for the Israeli government has said that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet US President Donald Trump on the 29th of December. Meanwhile, Netanyahu had earlier stated that he will be discussing with Trump the second phase of a US plan to end the war in Gaza later this month. A ceasefire between Israel and Hamas came into effect in October. Both sides have repeatedly accused each other of violating the truce, and wide gaps remain on key issues yet to be discussed under Trump's plan to end the war, including Hamas disarmament, the governance of post-war Gaza, and the composition and mandate of an international security force in the enclave. We're now joined by Sasha Machta, a political commentator, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Sasha, for joining us here on the programme. What more can you tell us, and what can we expect from this meeting on the 29th between the US President and the Israeli Prime Minister?
Yeah, this is the fifth meeting that Netanyahu has already had in the United States since Trump has taken power. Of course, this comes in the midst of the moving to phase 2 and all the issues relating to the disarmament of Hamas. These are most likely going to be the most pressing topics. There are also reports that the US is inching and trying to push Israel into phase 2, even though the last remaining body of the murdered hostage is still in Gaza. This is one of the main disagreements right now between the Trump administration and Israeli government and also Israeli public. Israelis fear that if we were to move on to phase 2 at the moment, then without the return of the last hostage, Rav Kveli, then it might be the last time he's ever have a chance of returning home. So this is one of the main disagreements that's probably going to be discussed to see how we can move to phase 2 while the last body is not returned. We're going to see conversations on what phase 2 is going to look like. Of course, Hamas had agreed when they signed the Donald Trump peace plan to voluntarily disarm, but everybody knows that this is not going to happen voluntarily. Hamas knows it. They stated it. So it seems as if Hamas has agreed to some sort of disarmament when they signed the deal, but some sort of disarmament, maybe not giving their defensive weapons, as they call it, or giving it to another Palestinian body entity. So there's not the same agreement that Trump and Israel and definitely the Western backers had in mind. So the question of how to disarm Hamas is going to be the most important issue at the meeting between Trump and Netanyahu. Also, the mandate of the International Stabilization Force. Of course, it got the sort of certificate of approval, the go-ahead, the green light in the UN, National Security Council. So it's just a question of time for this body to enter Gaza. But the question is, who's going to be willing to send soldiers? Of course, Qatar and Turkey are not welcome. Israel has vetted both Qatar and Turkey's presence in Gaza, both rebuilding and in the International Stabilization Force. So we're going to have to see what leverage Trump has over many moderate Arab nations to actually be willing to send in their soldiers, which is understandably a challenge for many if Hamas is not already disarmed. Many of these countries have stated that they do not wish to enter and fight Hamas, rather be a peacekeeping force. So these are the two main points of friction. How are we moving from phase 1 and phase 2 if the last hostage is not returned? And who is going to actually enter Gaza and be willing to disarm Hamas?
And of course, the two men meeting, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Donald Trump, of course, wants to be known as a global peacemaker, and with this fragile ceasefire seeming to not grind to a halt, but almost there. How much do both of these men need this to move on, or do they?
Trump, of course, he needs this. This is going to be one of the biggest achievements of his life regarding foreign policy. What he was able to do to return all the living hostages to Israel was something that most analysts and most experts saw impossible. Everyone thought that Hamas would definitely not be willing to give up their greatest asset, which were the hostages, but Trump was able to do that. But beyond that, Trump wants to change the face of the Middle East. And this is a goal that is shared with Netanyahu. These two men, of course, with their large egos and personalities, they have a deep interest, not just for their countries to change the face of the Middle East, but also for their legacies. If Trump was able to reach some sort of regional agreement with Saudi Arabia joining, maybe Syria and Lebanon in some sort of security agreements, this would be, of course, worthy of a Nobel Prize at the least, but also of a legacy for history as the president of peace who changed the Middle East forever. So Trump really wants to get this done. He's already done the impossible and bring the hostages home. Now is a question of how is he actually going to turn this achievement into a negotiation, into an agreed deal that is going to both remove Hamas from power and also seek peace with the neighbors and Israel and build a coalition against Iran. So that's on Trump's side. Netanyahu, as you probably know, there are elections coming up. So this would be significant if you were able to get Hamas to disarm without sending Israeli troops, which have already spent so much time, 2 years fighting a brutal enemy in Gaza under the worst conditions. If you were able to get this done without having to send and sacrifice a single soldier, that would be
Yes.
a tremendous achievement on his behalf. So the two men have an interest in getting this done, but of course Israel has a deeper interest in a commitment to their people so that October 7th can't happen again, but also that the last remaining hostage comes home, because if it's not now, then it might never be a chance to return this last body. So these are the
Yes.
main points that are going to be discussed and the main interests behind the meeting for these two strong men.
Yes, Sashta Machta, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme, and thank you for taking the time. We now move on and over to Syria, and the people of the country have marked the first anniversary of the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad and his iron-fisted rule with jubilant celebrations in major cities as the fractured nation struggles to find stability and recover from years of war. Meanwhile, the Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara has said that Syria reaffirms the commitment to the principle of transitional justice to ensure for all those who violated the law and committed crimes against the Syrian people. Let's listen in to what Ahmed al-Shara had to say.
واليوم ونحن نخطو خطواتنا على طريق بناء سوريا الجديدة نؤكد التزامنا بمبدأ العدالة الانتقالية لضمان محاسبة كل من انتهك القانون وارتكب جرائم بحق الشعب السوري. أما اليوم ومع إشراق شمس الحرية فإننا نعلن عن قطيعة تاريخية مع ذاك الموروث وهدما كاملا لوهم الباطل ومفارقة دائمة لحقبة الاستبداد والطغيان إلى فجر شديد، فجر قوامه العدل والإحسان والمواطنة والعيش المشترك.
We move on once again, and in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia and Qatar have signed a landmark deal to build a high-speed rail linking their capitals. The agreement was signed by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani during the Emir's visit to Riyadh. The project highlights growing cooperation between the Gulf neighbours who were once deeply at odds, signalling a new era of connectivity and regional partnership. And that's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.